The beautiful but brutal mountains of southern Oregon. Sunday, November 26th, morning dawns for James Kim, his wife, and 2 small children. They are stranded. With little gas left in their station wagon, worsening weather conditions, and with no idea where they were, the Kims pulled off the road the night before. But now, daylight brings pounding rain and driving snow.
They made numerous attempts to try to call for assistance using a cell phone, but there is really bad cell service in that area, and apparently they were unable to get out.
James, Katie, and the kids are stuck on a dangerous logging road, 30 miles west of Grants Pass, a town of reasonable size on their map. They would spend 5 days, 5 long and frightening days in this remote spot before rescue efforts even begin. Katie later gave details to her rescuers.
On Monday, November 27th, she indicated it snowed all day. It was snowing so hard they had to stay in the car. They occasionally started up the car to heat it just to stay warm. Tuesday, November 28th, it snowed again and rained all day. They stayed in the car, occasionally again starting it up so they could have heat.
In San Francisco, friends and family are concerned. Charlene Wright is the manager of the Church Street Apothecary, one of 2 boutiques that the Kims own.
We expected them back on Monday night. Tuesday came around. I didn't have any word from her. I didn't have any, notes or emails or anything. That was pretty unusual, especially after coming back from such a long vacation.
After 3 or 4 days of being stranded in the hostile Coast Range Mountains of southern Oregon, the Kims finally run out of gas.
They started fires with magazines and wet driftwood to stay warm. Thursday, November 30th, they used a spare tire in the vehicle to start a fire in the afternoon.
And now, friend Charlene Wright's concern turns into alarm.
So I went to the house, and it was obvious that no one had been there as of Tuesday night. And I, decided I don't want to make a big fuss. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I'll sleep on it, and then Wednesday morning came, and I realized something was really wrong.
Wright goes to the police and files a missing persons report. Word of the Kims' disappearance begins to spread.
I got a call from a friend who lives in Chicago, and she had asked me if I had seen them.
Katie's college friend Ryan Lee is one of the last people to see James alive, the day before the family vanishes.
And I said, yeah, I went out to brunch, on Saturday with them. What's going on? Didn't know that they hadn't shown up. And then she says, well, they haven't made it back to San Francisco. And I was like, oh, they probably stopped somewhere, Then I found out, that they hadn't been answering their phone calls, that they had missed important meetings and whatnot at work. So that's kind of was a big shocker, because that's not like them at all to do that. I just have to believe that there's some explanation for it, I don't, you can't think the worst, or else you're not going to get through the day.
4 days into the crisis, the Kims are very cold and hungry. They melt snow for water and ration baby food and crackers for the kids. At first, James and Katie eat wild berries, but give that up for fear of being poisoned. Katie was not only able to breastfeed her 7-month-old daughter, Sabine, she also breastfed 4-year-old Penelope.
Friday, December 1st, she indicated that they burned all 4 remaining tires. They were trying to signal for some help, and also it was a source of heat, but the wood was hard to get because it was frozen. It was hard to move, and what wood they would get, they would try to store underneath the car to keep it dry if they could, or at least let it dry out so they could use it. And then later on that afternoon, the fire had already gone out.
A formal search begins. Police, family members, and volunteers begin combing the area. James' sister Eva even began searching credit card records. But with 4 highways, dozens of rural snowbound roads, and elevations reaching 4,000 feet, the task at hand is daunting. Lieutenant Dennis Dinsmore is with the local sheriff's department.
We've had ground crews attempt to drive clear through. They were stopped due to the impassable conditions. 4-wheel drive vehicles were unable to go further.
That afternoon, despite the fact they hear the sound of helicopters, the family, Katie would later tell her rescuers, felt anything but safe. After nearly a week, James Kim takes a desperate step to save his wife and children. He leaves his family and the shelter of his car to get help.
They thought that the town of Galice was about 4 miles away, where in reality it was probably more like around 15 miles away. But James thought that he could reach it in a couple hours.
As James leaves his family behind, the Kims face the ultimate question: how to survive.
The Kims' plan was a good one, so says park ranger and survival expert Ken Brink.
I think they made a lot of good decisions and stayed with the vehicle and stayed with their shelter. I think because of that, many people don't do that. I think because of that, that's why probably 3 members of the family survived.
Shelter is the first priority in what experts call the rule of 3s. You can survive about 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, but in extreme conditions, they say, only 3 hours without shelter. But a shelter also needs heat, a problem that can be easy to solve in a vehicle. Here's how you do that. A candle in a coffee can will keep you warm through the night. But with or without a candle, no matter how safe, how secure a shelter is, it's also tight and confining, and it can be maddening.
Being in a confined space in a storm for a long period of time is a difficult thing. People that climb mountains have tents that are bright yellow to help them combat depression and help them cope with the claustrophobia. And I would imagine that some of those factors would be the same in a vehicle, I would imagine.
Of course, the greatest unknown that the Kims faced was how long to wait for rescuers before leaving the shelter of their stranded car.
At some point, when do you try to, leave your shelter and make your way to help? There are certainly some incidents where that's worked. And it's hard to know. Nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody can understand that the plane might be coming in a day. Certainly after a period of a week when things are getting desperate, I think you've got to make difficult calls.
For James and Katie Kim, a difficult call they'd have to make.
So exactly what happens when you're trapped in a small space, exposed to extreme cold, hunger, and even worse than that, uncertainty. In just a minute, the story from someone who knows. A snowstorm buried him alive in his SUV for 14 days.